Jordan Peterson has been in the news quite a lot recently, and this one seems alright, seems good, and it's definitely not a new frontier. Well, it's going to be the biggest endeavor so far. He was successful in setting up a Patreon alternative in Locals alongside Dave Rubin after Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, was unjustly kicked off the platform, and Locals is thriving, even though Peterson doesn't have anything to do with it, so theoretically he's going to be more hands-on with this World Economic Forum alternative? Okay, so what's the WEF to begin with? Well, it's obviously a globalist think tank where all of the world's worst policies and ideas are gestated before they are set loose upon the population. So how do you combat something like that? Well, you gotta continue to create this parallel economy that's going on, because that's the only way that we're ultimately going to end up escaping the matrix, because you can't go off the grid anymore. You have to be on all the grids. That's the solution. And until a parallel economy, which this is definitely going to be a part of, ends up getting established, well, you got to be everywhere and you got to be everything all at once. So I like the headline. So let's just dig into the body of this. Jordan Peterson sets up pro-human alternative to globalist corporatist World Economic Forum. Okay. How are you going to go about this? What's the mission statement? Who's going to be a part of it? All of these are very important. Professor of psychology and public speaker Jordan Peterson has announced the formation of an international consortium that could serve as a kind of populist alternative to the elitist World Economic Forum. Well, given some of his recent statements, I wouldn't, this is going to be a spicy take. I wouldn't necessarily say he's all that populist recently, especially after his weird battle, like so many other before him, and going up against random internet avatars. It's like, okay, I understand sometimes criticism can get to be a little much, but if we're going to start waging a war against egg icons and anime avatars on Twitter, you're probably barking up the wrong tree, and maybe you should spend less time on social media and more time producing the content that people came to love you for to begin with. That's just my opinion, but I'm not setting up some sort of powerful consortium. Food for thought, really. And provide a countervailing force against globalist aims and narratives. If you don't have Alex Jones on the panel, what the fuck are you doing? Peterson laid out his plan in an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. I have yet to listen to that. That is the first Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson podcast I had not jumped at listening to. I've been aware of it for a while. I just haven't got around to it yet because, hey man, I've been forthright about this. There's a playlist on my channel about the importance of Dr. Jordan Peterson. I like him. I hold him in high regard. I have always, even previous to any of the recent developments, 6 months-ish recent, I thought that he's been stellar into certain fields, and certain things that he talks about outside of that breadth of knowledge, he's pretty good at. But he's always been lacking whenever it comes to the relationship department. And because he's been opining in that area due to the fact that he's hooked up with those tradcucks over at Daily Wire, he's become a little bit more unpalatable. And that failure in that realm continues to kind of just jade the rest of his analysis on things. He's been off. He's been off initially on the vax, initially on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He's just kind of, gotten out of that sphere. But when Peterson's on, there's none better. I still love the fact that he absolutely took Sam stupid-ass Harris just behind the woodshed on stage. I think that was probably the point in time when Sam Harris realized that, oh yeah, I need to differentiate myself. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to simp for the Bidens. Yeah, that's going to be a great idea. Anyways, around 2,000 business, cultural, and political figures will be invited to take part in the consortium, he added, adding that he wants the discussion open and public and membership to the organization as broad as possible. That would put participation on a similar scale to the WEF's recent meeting in Davos, Switzerland, which amassed around 2,700 international leaders, Wall Street executives, central bankers, and celebrities, and a whole lot of whores. Peterson said the core idea of the consortium, which does not yet have an official name, will provide an we need an alternative vision for the future, an alternative to the kind of apocalyptic narrative that's being put forward, at least implicitly, by the organizations like the WEF. They're evil. They're bad. They aren't telling you what's right. They're trying to keep you weak. Critics have argued that the WEF uses scare tactics to paint a dire picture of the future to justify proposed solutions such as the Great Reset. I think that's a fairly accurate 1-2 line description of what the WEF is all about. It's all doom and gloom. There's no real solutions, no real palatable solutions. It's all, oh, this stuff will eventually work. Just give us enough decades. Like, oh, okay, cool. Just like how the climate's eventually just going to cook us all to a crisp. Okay, right. Yeah, I've seen that grift before. Think of a new one. We'll get around to it. We'll listen to you when we care. For instance, ahead of this year's WEF meeting, the group declared 2023 the year of the polycrisis. Which stripe is that on the flag? I don't know. Laying out an extensive matrix of threats, which focus on the supposed emergency of the climate change that critics have lambasted as unfounded alarmism. Yeah, exactly. The world is getting hotter. There is snow coming down in droves right now, my guy. It was 50 below for a week right before Christmas, okay? If you think climate is changing, if you think it's getting hotter or colder, staying the same, oh, the ice is melting. Ice always melts. What are you talking about? But if you're trying to wrap that up into everything, if everything's a climate crisis, if everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency. Nothing's a crisis. Choose your words carefully. Great Reset, the Great Reset, which has been associated with the controversial slogan, "You'll have nothing and you'll be happy." Where do you get that slogan from? It's right on their website. I did a video on that. Oh Lord, that video is coming on about 2 years now at this point. Still as relevant as ever, if you can find it in the archives. Puts forward a top-down approach to managing various threats that include rejigging capitalism to distribute... just getting rid of capitalism is just globalism. It's communism. Everybody will live in the government pods. Everybody will wear the government jumpsuits. Everybody will eat the government bugs. And you don't have to worry about anything. It'll just all be wonderful. And everybody will have their government jobs where they'll mow the government's lawn and tend to the government's buildings while the gilded elites get to just lord over the rest of us. Well, whatever one's left after their Malthusian tactics of having about 500,000 people on Earth. But then there will be no more climate crisis. Sure thing. Critics of the Great Reset says that it's an attempt by international organizations to undermine national sovereignty by centralizing power and decision-making at the expense of individual freedoms and local communities. Yeah, exactly. There's also concerns that the solutions the scheme proposes involves a high degree of economic interventionism by governments and social engineering by global elites who want to impose progressive values and beliefs on traditional-minded populations. As an alternative to what he's describing as the WEF's apocalyptic narratives, Peterson said the consortium wants instead to put forward a vision that's enticing and inviting. Imagine the world you want with none of this Malthusian limits of growth nonsense. Correct me if I'm wrong, and it's been a minute. I haven't brushed up on my Peterson history recently. He hasn't been talking, at least back when I was listening on Heavy, kind of the pre-rehab Peterson stuff. He wasn't really talking about the whole Malthusian cabal and those Malthusian ideas beforehand, but I'm glad he's hip to this now. The Malthusian limits to growth is a concept based on the notion that population growth will eventually outstrip the food supply, leading to widespread famine, disease, and death. The key criticism to the idea is that it's overly simplistic and fails to account for the complex interplay of food production, population, and technological advancement. It's also inconsistent with historical data, as the model's dire predictions have failed to pass despite a growing global population, like how California is supposed to be underwater by the year 2007. And there's going to be no ice on the Himalayas by 2009, 2016, 2035. Don't worry, we'll eventually get there. We need to get our act together. Everybody needs to clean their room. And everyone can have enough, and maybe more than enough. There's no limit to the abundance of natural world can produce. Bucko. I like Peterson. Don't get it twisted. I just also like to do a cheap impression. Peterson listed some of the core ideas that they will be discussing at the October-November 2023 meeting. Oh, so it's already on the books. This isn't no pipe dream. This stuff is happening. Love to see it. Including enhancing energy production and distribution, protecting individual freedoms against tyranny. Oh, this just kind of sounds like some sort of a con circle jerk. And pushing back against failing birth rates with pro-family policies. Just wife up these hoes. God, I'm sick of that narrative. You don't get to save the planet by making energy prices so expensive that no one poor can afford them. That's off the table, he said, adding that the development of alternative sources of energy would be welcome. Nuclear. You don't get to impose your utopian vision in service of your narcissism on the poor. We're going to try to make the poor rich, try to alleviate poverty. Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. Experts have criticized ideas like the Green New Deal. No, it's not law or anything like that. We just go ahead and cherry pick any of the ideas that were in the original proposal and then just rewrap them in a little bit more palatable of a situation. They just haven't quite got around to the whole regulating cow farts yet, but I guess that's kind of soft been addressed by getting rid of fertilizer and limiting how much livestock you can keep by, just kind of stifling how much additional feed you can grow. Well, I guess they have. Interesting. Making technologically immature solutions by government dictates and subsidies, making energy less reliable and more expensive with a disproportionate impact on the poor. Peterson said the key discussion point in the consortium will be how to obtain energy and resources at the lowest possible cost as rapidly as possible to the largest number of people around the world. Another is to look at the ways to manage governance in order to stop the march of something like pathological gigantism. Okay, which he describes as big and growing power by the combination of corporate, governmental, and media, in what he describes as a kind of corrupt collusion. Yeah, it's crony capitalism or just fascism, realistically, if you take a look at it now. He's also in discussions that would involve exploring a pro-human view of stewardship. What do you mean by that? How do we prioritize our attempts to establish our states and our international relationships properly so that we prioritize human well-being in a way that's a harmony with the nature to the extent possible, while avoiding the trappings of the Malthusian ideas that there are too many mouths on the planet to feed and that you're evil if you just think about having children. Furthermore, Peterson said consortium will explore policies that would counteract falling birth rates by encouraging stable two-parent families that are child-centered. All right. So you're gonna get the law out of marriage? How about that? That would definitely go a far way. In the West, we're being very immature. Oh my God, I know where you're going with this. I don't know where you're going for sure, but I know where you're going. In spirit. Oh, we think of the purpose of a marriage is a happiness when people are involved in marriage, the husband and the wife. That's just not the purpose of marriage at all. The purpose is a long-term facilitation of the psychological and spiritual development and the establishment of an environment that's beneficial to children. Yeah, okay, so how about rethinking the whole marriage contract where one party is incentivized to break it and the conditions in which to take that child out and into the lone custodianship of one partner off the back of simple allegations. The numbers are in, and unless you undo years and years of bad marriage law, in the West, that's not going to happen. It's a wonderful idea, and it's something that I'm sure your think tank will grift the fuck out of, but unless you want to reconcile, unless you want to wrestle with that idea, hell, if you need an example a little bit closer to home, well, check out your daughter's situation. He also touches on the primacy of voluntarily cooperating among members of society rather than top-down coercion. One story is power rules everything, he said, but that's not a very good story. It's a very pathological story. Well, it's an unflattering truth, but it's a truth nonetheless. Peterson argued that taking responsibility at most local level is key to preventing the rise of tyranny. That is true. That is true. He said that is based on the idea that personal responsibility should be taken at each step of oneself, family, community, state, and nation. Yeah. And the way that he describes it, it's always the man's problem. Oh, the man needs to be better. Otherwise, these hoes just won't know not to be hoes. Really? When left to their own devices, it seems like women tend to find social media and attention-seeking behavior all by themselves. What do you think it's called? The oldest profession. The idea that you have to produce a hierarchy of responsibility, distributed responsibility, is an antithesis to tyranny, which Peterson suggested could be the model for good governance. Yeah, the most competent people get to the top, not the ones that check out the right number of requisite boxes. How about that? So you wouldn't have a situation like the police chief who has been fired multiple times in Memphis. How about that one? How you can continue to fail up the ladder just because you have the right genitals and color of skin. He said the idea is rooted in Western tradition. Yes, of course. And again, these are just trad-cuck ideas. Okay, where they don't actually want to work on real world solutions. They just want a time machine. They just all want to go back to 1950s where these ideas are just generally rooted. Oh, everything used to work better back when men were men and women were women. Shit's not gonna go back at the drop of the hat, okay? Snap your fingers, shit's just not gonna roll back downhill. Unless, of course, there's a free 1-month subscription to somebody's OnlyFans at the bottom, for fuck's sake. It's a good idea. He's saying a lot of important things, I guess, and it'll be very palatable to the masses that are out there. And all of the people, all of the pundits will just applaud as the same old tired fucking tactics are just trotted out again and again and again. Best of luck to you. I look forward to peeking into what you guys are going to be discussing, who's going to be on the panels. I already got some ideas that are out there, but to say I'm optimistic about this, that would be vastly overselling it. Peterson, I like you. I like you a lot. I think your work is incredibly important, but you're not addressing the root cause of this. And until you do, you're going to be off for a very, very, very long time, continuing to go out there fighting ghosts all over the internet. So best of luck to you, but stay over there. With all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.